that is a good question.
Thank you.
Yes, first of all, yes, absolutely. You know, Argo is in many ways a traditional structure. You know, it's a setup, here's the problem, here's how we're going to solve it, and then here's the big finale, right? And so you try to hide the seams. You know, you're sewing this structure together, and you try to hide them, you know, so that you don't notice that it's working in this 3-act way. But it's very traditional in that way. It's a traditional Hollywood movie in the way that it happens. And I increasingly feel frustrated by that. I've been working, as you know, I've actually just written a script that is much more challenging in terms of time and narrative and point of view, you know, and much more fractured, and trying to figure out, and I did write it for a studio, and it seems like they're receptive to it. We'll see if it gets made, but trying to figure out how to give a sense of, I mean, let me put it this way, in a 3-act movie, you feel that there is a God, right? You do A, and it leads to B, and it leads to C. And the world feels, even if people are shooting and chasing, the world feels like we understand it, right? And I think what you're talking about, which I think is very important, which is to make films that reflect the fragmentary, confusing, sort of cubist, you know, Picasso-esque way that we live. And so I'm excited by films that do that, and I wish that more films did it. It's hard in a studio environment because if they're spending a lot of money, you know, Christopher Nolan has done it, you know, he did it in Memento a little bit, right? Memento has some elements of an avant-garde film, maybe. Some others have done it, but there is resistance. So in a way, I think you earn trust by hopefully making a movie that is a little more popcorny, you know, and then maybe eventually they let you do that. Or, you know, you could go to independent film or to television where there's a little bit more freedom. But in general, I think, you know, if you manage to write a script that's compelling, I think Hollywood people want to make interesting things. They often don't, but they want to, because those Hollywood people, they want to wake up and feel like their jobs have meaning, right? Because they're going to have to make the chainsaw movies and whatever, but a lot of those people want to feel like they're involved in the arts, because after all, they chose to be in movies and not to be bankers, right? So they want to be in the arts, and they want to do good work. It's just that the commercial demands overpower that, and then they get sucked in and they just, you know, they serve commerce instead of art. But the hope is that you could make studio movies that serve both. In the case of Argo, I had a real person, and so that it was a slightly different thing because I wanted to learn a lot about him, but I also wanted to leave some mysteries, because a lot of times if you know everything about it, you know, like I think for most of us it would be very hard to write a movie about my brother or my sister. You know, I mean, it can be done, and sometimes the best movies come from that, but it's very, very hard because you know them so well, so having a bit of mystery about a character, I think, is a good thing, so that when you're writing, you can be surprised by the person, you know. But that said, I do like to try to know as much as possible. I mean, I don't actually write it out, you know. I don't write a story out, the backstory, but I spend a long time circling and circling and circling and trying to really think about the person and how they talk and the music of their speech and who their friends are and who they know and how they dress and what they hate and what they like. And then if you're lucky, I think one day the character just comes and tells you what he or she wants to say. You know, that happened with Sahar in Argo. I didn't even know that Sahar was going to be a character. She was this small character in the background, right? And then one day I was sitting there and Sahar, the housekeeper, said, "I have more to say. I'm not done. You're not done with me." And so she became, in a way, the soul of, for me, the soul of that part of the movie. And that you almost have to get superstitious or metaphysical and just say thank you. You know, thank you for telling me what you want to say. But the preparation, I think, of knowing a lot about them, I think, is the welcome mat, right? You put out the welcome mat by knowing as much as you can, and then you hope that the characters come and talk to you. I think, well, life did surprise me in the sense that I thought I was going to be only a film director. I didn't think, I went to school to, well, first of all, we were in La Universidad together, and as Julissa knows, or La Embajadora, Julie, whatever. Senora La Embajadora. I didn't know. I thought maybe I would be a professor and write about books. I thought maybe I would write for the theater. And then one day we were in graduate school at Cambridge, and suddenly I said, well, what about film? What if I went and made films? So then I started as a director, and I was directing. I did a couple things directing from other people's scripts, and then the moment came when the scripts that were brought to me were not things that I wanted to do. And I said, well, if I'm serious about this, I really have to think about what I want to do. What do I want on my tombstone? I don't want my tombstone to say, made a couple of comedies about neurotic New Yorkers and died, right? So
That's Woody Allen.
It's Woody Allen, yeah, because Woody Allen's already done it. And done it much better than I could do it. So anyway, so then I wrote a script for myself to direct, right? And then and I was going to direct it, and we were setting it up, and then the money went away, and suddenly I had this script, but I had no opportunity to direct. But because I'd written this script, people said, okay, well, that movie fell apart, but we like that script, so do you want to write something else? And that was how I got my first professional screenwriting job. And then, and then I was paid to write another. And then finally, Argo came along, so I never thought that I would be primarily focusing on writing, but I feel lucky that the opportunity came. But yeah, I think it, well, same, I think for all of us, not only the arts, but like, Julissa, you didn't know you were going to end up as an ambassador, or not even close, right? Life just does surprise you. But the good thing is that I feel that I'm doing what I love to do, right? And to get paid enough, whether you're making a lot of money or whether you're just enough to pay your rent, I feel like getting paid to do what you love, so it doesn't feel like work, is the greatest gift. Right? Because I spent a lot of years doing jobs that were really, kind of bad jobs in order to pay for my writing, right? And then the day that you get a check for writing, and and you think, oh my God, this is my job. I get to sit and do this. It's a great privilege. I mean, in the abstract, I would love to take on some big classic, like, Moby Dick, well, not the Bible. I do love the book Moby Dick, because it's very Shakespearean, and it's very cinematic, and it's about mania. There's a character at the center of it that is so dramatic, and is Moby Dick was. Julissa and I were talking in the car on the way here about the movie There Will Be Blood, which we both love that movie, There Will Be Blood. And in a way, Moby Dick is like that, because whale oil was like the rock oil of the 19th century, right? So Moby Dick is this great story about capitalism and, ambition and mania, and I don't think anyone's ever really done that well. I mean, there have been a couple versions of it, but I don't think anyone's done it justice. I'd love to do that. But then there's also, closer to home, there's a small script about the Bronx, where Julissa's from, that I wanted to do for years, which is about the drug wars in the Bronx and women in poverty, and if somebody said tomorrow you get to make one film, I would make that Bronx film. But it's very hard, because again, it goes back to that, that question about Hollywood. It's the one thing that Hollywood insists upon is that you need a star. If you're gonna, and if you're making a movie about 16-year-old girls in the Bronx, there's no star who can raise the money. So So yeah, and that is a big problem with Hollywood, because unless you have a character that can be played by Ben Affleck or George Clooney or Meryl Streep or Jennifer Lawrence, there's no, there's no economic model.
Right.
On HBO, maybe, HBO can take chances and make things without stars, but it's the economics of film are really hard. I hope that changes, but
no DirecTV too.
yeah, and now DirecTV and Netflix and even Showtime and Stars. So I think opportunities are expanding. I mean, nobody knew Bryan Cranston when Breaking Bad started, right? Nobody knew James Gandolfini when The Sopranos started, and so television can create stars, whereas film, you kind of have to come to a film with a star already, I think, most of the time. Obviously not an independent film. If you could keep the budget small, then that's great. But unfortunately, this project is a big canvas, and so you're faced with either a very small budget and using the actors you want, or a big budget and using the actors that you don't want.